Welcome, everybody, to the biweekly user group meeting for Backdrop CMS. It is where I am, December 19th. Today we're going to be talking about AI and Backdrop in particular. Justin's going to show us the AI module that he's been working on. But we might also talk a little bit about using AI to port modules or create modules if we have time. I did a little experimenting with that recently, but let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Tim Erickson. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota, where we are in the middle of, well, about to get a snowstorm, I think. Supposed to get like 6 or 8 inches of snow, and I got to drive later this afternoon. So wish me luck. Luke, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I am Luke McCormick. I'm a web consultant and analyst in the San Francisco Bay Area, known as Sell Ear on various things. And I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about AI today. Do you want to go, Jen?
I don't know if she's still there.
Or
I'll
Joseph?
I'll be back in a
Oh,
minute.
Okay,
Sorry.
no problem. Joseph.
Sure. Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm a developer from Las Vegas, Nevada. And one of the core committers. Yeah, I
Hey,
guess Justin.
Yep. Justin Kaiser. I'm a developer in Muncie, Indiana. I work for a nonprofit called the Academy of Model Aeronautics. And I use the OpenAI a lot lately. Um, I was using Drupal modules, connecting my Drupal sites to OpenAI and other generative AI models. And I have backdrop sites. So I was like, hey, I want to do that with backdrop. And I think there are possibilities for making some things a whole lot easier for our my content editors, things that they don't like to do that I can automate for them, like creating summaries and adding tags to articles and adding alt text to images that I can't get people to do all the time. So
mhm.
I think those are three possibilities to really enhance your site content. And I've been trying to get those to work in Backdrop. So we'll go through a demo of what I've backported from Drupal 10 for this module. Backstory with the OpenAI module in Drupal. It was the first one that came out for your Drupal sites. Back when I started this in May, it was kind of the one everyone used, but then there were a bunch of separate projects in Drupal with a bunch of smart people working on different things, and they all decided to combine forces on another module, which I didn't port because it didn't exist when I started this. So my module is quite a bit smaller. It focuses only on using OpenAI, and it can only use Pinecone as the backend for the vector database. But it's getting along the path of doing what I wanted it to do. So I'm going to start my screen share.
And maybe just to clarify what you just said, the Drupal module then is more flexible in that you can hook up to any AI backend, right?
Almost anything.
Right.
Like
Okay.
there are so many possibilities that it's frightening.
Right. So presumably that would be a desirable outcome, but also probably a lot more work. So we can't leave that all on Justin. If people want to help with that, they should talk about it. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just started with a demo sandbox on Backdrop
Mhm.
CMS. Since I've released this module, I can install the released version, even though I've made some changes to the dev version. So you can go search for it. And this is going to be a good test to see if I run into any problems.
True live demo.
So it requires the key module, so it's going to go get that too. And the key module requires the plugin manager module, so it's going to go get that. And now you have a rather intimidating page here of what you decide to turn on. For now, I'm only going to turn on key plugin manager and the core OpenAI module. And it tells me that it's not going to work because I haven't configured my keys yet. So I have to go get an OpenAI API key if I haven't gotten one yet, if I don't have one to plug in. So I can go to that link there and it sends me off to the OpenAI platform and I could sign up here and get an API key. There's instructions somewhere in here on how to do that. But since I already have that, I'm going to go over to my settings page. And then I can't do anything here because I have to make my keys for the key module. Because I don't want people to willingly store their keys and configuration, even though I'm going to end up setting it up that way on my sandbox site here. So I'm going to hop over to the key module. I'm going to add OpenAI key. I'm going to say authentication and configuration, and I'm going to pop over here on another screen to pop in my key value. As long as I can find it. There it is.
So while Justin's doing that, I'll just mention that I helped a little bit get the wiki going for the OpenAI module. And for example, I put instructions in there on how to, also in there about how to get an OpenAI key.
Yes, Tim was working on this, working with this module and discovered something that we needed to fix because if you sign up for a new key from OpenAI today, it gives you a much longer key than it did in the past because they've presumably given out more of them. And we found out that the key module using the configuration mode did not accept these long API keys. So we had to fix that. And it's important to check if you have any white space in your
Yes.
in your key when you paste it in, because the white space will make it not work.
Yeah.
So I created my keys with my API key and my organization key, and then I have to go back to the configuration screen here and save the key and the key, and then the org and the org, and click save. And if it worked, you have the available models fetched that show up on this screen. If you configure this and these don't show up, something about your key or org key is off. So go back to the key module and make sure you've got everything right and trim the white space and make sure it all works. Because if these don't show up here on the configuration page, it's not talking to OpenAI. So once I've got that and I know it's working, then I can go turn on the other guys. Oh,
Need the develop module properly.
yep, I do. I need the devel module. And I couldn't figure out how to get it to automatically download like the key in the plugin manager. So now I can go back here
I'm going to step away for just a second.
and I can turn it
Keep
on.
going.
So that gave me in configuration OpenAI, that gave me all of the submodules. So the first one to go play around with to make sure everything is working as the Explorer. And this is just like a one-off chat with OpenAI. You can ask it one question and it's going to give you a response in this field down here. And you open up the options and you say, which model you want to use. I use the GPT-4o mini because it costs less. I keep the temperature the same, and I normally up this to 1,000 or 15. And I don't normally change the profile that gets sent as part of the prompt. And then we can just type something in here. Backdrop CMS and hit submit, and it's going to send that prompt off, and it's going to populate the response field down here, hopefully. And it didn't. And I don't know why.
Live demo, maybe you broke it with your last update.
Well, I know it works on this one. Or at least it did. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it's supposed to do, but I don't know why it didn't do it here.
Okay.
That's concerning. We'll see if one of
Well-
the other ones works. Oh. This is a neat circle that you can get in because I just generated this in the Explorer. And I'm going to try to do the text to speech. So you put whatever you want to, it will theoretically take this text and convert it into an MP3 using one of their voices.
Does it play it? Well, we're about to find out.
Nothing in the demo site is working. So I'll go back to my local one. And I just put my key on there.
Tell everybody.
To revoke it.
Okay. Now OpenAI to speech.
So it sent that off and it created me a file that I can download.
Are you hearing that, Justin? We're not.
Yes, I'm hearing it.
Yeah. But I've learned that to have Zoom hear your computer requires special config.
All right, so that's not,
Yeah, we're not actually going to hear the results.
but what it did was it put it in the managed files
Oh, it
over
did.
here.
Nice.
Over here. So you can So now it's at this URL. So then I can go into the audio one and say, hey, this is the path of the audio file, and I want to transcribe it. Oh, I've got to go here. That's right. I need this URL.
Oh.
And I'm back to where I started.
Yeah. That was fast.
Now, those things aren't that useful to begin with.
Mhm.
It doesn't seem that useful, but since it has that capability, I
Mhm.
think it could be expanded into other contributed modules where, okay, I have an audio file of an interview someone did, and they want to turn that into a blog post. So they could just upload the audio recording of their interview and it magically create the text for them. So they
Mhm.
don't have to transcribe it themselves.
Okay.
The Prompt Explorer one, I don't think is all that useful because it uses older models
Mhm.
in here. But it was in the Drupal module, so I converted it.
Sure.
Now we're gonna have some fun. So I am gonna generate some content. I'm just gonna say 5. No comments. Maximum number of words 4. And I'm gonna get on the right tab. That was the regular generate nodes. So I'm gonna use for how many? Let's say 1,500 tokens. Say 5 of these. Four in the title. So I had this really cool. Okay, we'll hold that. We can just use the various topics. See what it comes up with.
I found that the generating content is a bit slow. It's slower than most things. So just be patient, right? Like I created 30 nodes and I think it took like 30 seconds or more. Does that sound right?
That sounds right.
Is there any way to, if there's an image field on your post, can you do both at the same time or no?
This won't, yeah, the regular one will generate images, but this one won't. And that's another one of these. Well, that's thinking we could probably go over here and look at the DALL-E image generation. But my node creation is done, so it created 5 nodes. And unfortunately, some of them have asterisks in the title. I thought I'd fix that. But
You
it
have
made,
to fix that with the prompt or?
no, that's part of the module. I have to tell it to omit those. You could probably put it in the prompt too. Like tell the prompt, don't put asterisks in the title. I think that's what the module does. In the prompt, it was supposed to anyway. And maybe there was maybe there was supposed to be code in there to strip out the asterisks, but it's content for a dev site. It may not even matter to someone.
Right.
Let's see what do we want to create an image of?
A birthday party for background.
Featuring a black baby dragon.
I find the word cartoonish helps
Hmm.
in my prompts for backdrop, but you could try with or without. Because sometimes the baby dragon looks a little too fierce.
Cute baby dragon.
Okay, let's keep it.
Or black and white baby dragon if you don't want to confuse things. Although,
Oh, I didn't tell it the color.
Yeah,
It'll
that's
come
okay.
up.
That's okay. But if you're really doing it, you usually want to say black, otherwise it'll give you something.
This takes longer than the node generation, I think. This takes a really long time. We're gonna, no,
There it
not
is.
bad.
That wasn't too bad.
That,
Yeah.
so the thing that this doesn't do that I want it to do, that the Drupal OpenAI module didn't do, but the AI module does, is the text-to-speech thing got added to the managed files.
Mhm.
Oh, I did fix that. Oh, it did get added. Okay,
That's nice.
all right. I didn't remember that I did that.
Good work.
So it's a roundabout way that you could create images for your content, but I don't want to really make that easier for folks. Let's see what else. Log analyzer. So this is helpful for developers, perhaps. Let's see. It sends this message in the log off and comes back with a explanation of what the heck it means. Because how many folks have gone into their log after this and copied the message out there and then put it in the chat GPT
Right.
or Google?
Yeah.
This does that for you.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay, there's two content ones. So Tim, this is where you were confused, which I agree, this is confusing because, well, when you initially turn it on, go back over to the demo site that isn't working. You've got summarize text, suggest content title, and suggest taxonomy down here, but no way to create content. You've got to add the button to the CK editor for that to happen. So to configure that, you've got to go to your text format and drag the button up here to your active toolbar, and then click the button, click to turn it on, select the model. And then you've got the wording in the Drupal module is text completion.
So you would
That's-
type a prompt into the body first and then, oh no, okay, you click that
You
first.
click that, and then you can put your prompt in the window up here, which does expand to the amount of text that is put into it. I may have
Mhm.
overexpanded it with what I put in there now, but it used to just be like 3 lines and it would
Mhm.
go off the side. So I can put my prompt in there, and then it's going to Oh, that's right. This one wasn't working. I gotta figure out why the demo sites do that. So I get my response back in the body field and it looks scrappy,
Mhm.
but I can highlight all the text and then say reformat. And it will come back looking pretty eventually.
There's the
Yeah.
CK editor.
Not maybe, oh, there we go.
That's
Yeah,
what the
for sure.
CK editor integration does.
Yep. Might be nice in the future to have an option to do both steps at once, but for now, that's not a big deal.
I thought this was more cleaned up too. Anyway, now this stuff down here works. So I can suggest my title from what's in the body field. And then I can take this and put it back up here like that. And if I want to create my taxonomy terms, same deal. You gotta cut and paste and put it up there. Now these parts down here, there's no settings for them, which is a goal in the very near future. Because it hard codes that as using it hard codes all that stuff with the prompts.
Mhm.
And I believe it makes the choice on what model you're going to use for you. And I don't like that. So those are the big parts. And the part I've been working on lately is another submodule. And this site, if we go to OpenAI, there's an OpenAI alt module. So that means I create a post. I can add an image. Let's add our
Yeah.
dragon.
And our dragon, yeah.
Oh, well, I've got to fix that.
Okay,
That was the old that's the problem where it's not it doesn't have any usage.
sure.
So you can't use it in the media library.
Yeah. I've run into some problems like that when trying to create nodes and images programmatically, that they need to be, yeah, they have to have some usage and stuff, and there are ways to do that
But at any
properly.
rate,
Yeah.
most of the time when you add an image, either
Yeah.
from scratch or from your image media library, now underneath the alt text field, there is a generate alt text. So that grabs the image and sends the image off to GPT-4o Vision and comes back with alt text about the image, which I think is a very valuable, nifty feature. And it also works in the CK editor. You can add images in here and button is here. I haven't figured out how to move the button, so it's directly underneath the alt text button, alt text field.
Any control over how detailed the alt text is?
Not now.
Okay.
We need to have a configuration for that too.
Mhm.
But I think the prompt that it uses isn't terrible.
Mhm.
Let's find it. Oh, it's over here. It is in the method. This is the prompt. Can you
Okay.
see that?
Yeah.
And it is
Look at
actually
that.
the same prompt that is in the newer Drupal module.
Okay.
That has a settings page. So I basically copied this out of here and put it in the method.
Nice. I mean, could be nicer, but good start.
But ideally there needs to be a settings page like this where
Mhm.
you can edit the prompt and possibly even edit the model that it's using, even though I don't know if OpenAI has another one that does vision like that yet.
Oh, how are you doing on the presentation here? Do you have much more to show us, Justin? Because I think it would also
We're good.
it would also be interested for you to talk a little bit about how you use ChatGPT in doing this work.
All right. Well,
If you think you're done sort of showcasing the module, obviously you haven't shown everything, but I think you've shown all the highlights, right?
it's the big parts. Like there's the embeddings one that allows you to do AI search, but I haven't started working on the AI search module part of it yet. So it's just like the precursor for it. So yeah, I obviously use the OpenAI a lot to help me with things.
So can I interject here? So we were just talking to Irina briefly before, and she was suggesting it would be helpful if Justin shared how he uses OpenAI to do things like this. I'm going to just share quickly that I did a module a week and a half ago, a contrib module, to query the API for a TV website, something like the IMDb. I'm using a different website called Track TV that has lists of all the TV shows ever made. And I used OpenAI, and within about 6 to 8 hours, I created a working module that sort of queries and pulls down data and creates nodes in my local site. And I'd be curious to see how I learned a few things about how to work with OpenAI to create a module like that. I want to hear what Justin does and what tips he's learned.
So I put these on one screen, which makes things a little bit tight. But the alt text module, for an example, there was an issue in the Drupal module. There was an issue in the queue that added this submodule. There was a PR for it. So I pulled the PR and put it in my Drupal site, and it didn't work. So I had to fix it first in Drupal. And then I'm stuck with this. And Modules. Open it out.
What are you using for a text editor right now?
This is PHP Storm, but I've
Okay.
used
Sure.
VS Code for this too. So I always look at things side by side. Like I do this with Drupal 7 too. Like
Mhm.
if I'm porting a Drupal 7 module, I will spin up a Drupal 7 site and install the module and see what it's supposed to look like and supposed to do before I even start, because I'm like, I don't know what this is supposed to do, so I need to figure that out first so I can replicate what it's doing. And I also do that with Drupal 10. So I'm looking at this and okay, there's a service that isn't going to matter to us because we
Hmm.
don't have that in Backdrop, but there is a module file and there's an info file. So converting the info
Mhm.
file is simple, but I normally use GPT for it anyway. I'll just open the info file and say, hey, I'm working on converting a Drupal 10 module to Backdrop CMS, and I'll throw that in there and it'll spit it out for me and I won't have to type it.
Mhm.
And then I do the same thing with the module file, and it starts with that sort of thing. But some of these other modules in here, like there's a form, and there's oftentimes that's the settings form, and there's oftentimes this links.menu.yaml file, and there's a routing file, and those are menu hooks in Backdrop and Drupal 7. So I will grab what's in that menu file and the routing file, put it in GPT and say, hey, this is Drupal 10 converted to Backdrop CMS. I know this turns into a menu hook. Could you make that for me? And most of the time it's right.
Mhm.
And I do that with the form too. It just turns it into a settings form inside the module file. The alt module was different because it had this class for sending it off to GPT, sending the image off to get the alt text back. And I ended up I started out keeping that self-contained in the submodule, but then I realized um, that can go in my big OpenAI class that already existed, because there are methods in this class for getting the models and doing the chat and doing the text to speech and doing the embeddings. So describe image just became another method in here that I can use in the module to send the prompt off. But I didn't write that myself either, because I said, hey, let's turn this image client class into a method in the big OpenAI API PHP. And it got it mostly right. But it offers suggestions
Are you
a lot that are most of the way there, but not completely, because I find that I have to do a lot of debugging on like form structures, and it doesn't know all about the arrays on the page and how the form is constructed. You have to dig into that and then tell it, hey, this is where the alt field actually is.
are you
Because go ahead.
are you using Copilot for this or ChatGPT?
I'm just using GPT. I'm
Okay.
using most of the time I'm using 4.0,
Mhm.
ChatGPT 4.0,
Okay.
and I've had various success with using the specialized Drupal GPTs in there.
Mhm.
Sometimes they help, sometimes they don't. I tend to like using the generic one that has just everything.
Okay. I wonder if there's a way where you can point it at because we have all of our stuff on GitHub. I wonder if you can point it at the GitHub backdrop contrib repo and say, here's a list of working backdrop modules.
You can. You can
Okay.
send it links to things. Like what I another thing that I do all the time is I have I have
Okay.
this open.
Go ahead, yeah.
I have the documentation open,
Mm-hmm,
and I'll search for a hook, like
mm-hmm.
the hook I was using for the hook that this module uses, the
Right. Hook,
widget form alter, whatever,
right.
and I'll send it the link to that. Oh,
It'd be hook field widget.
yeah. This guy. Yeah. If I'll just drop the link to this in my chat
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, this documentation might help, and point it out the specific thing that he needs to do. And I'll go find other implementations of the hooks that I'm using in other modules or in core, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll drop in like the function from that module that, and I'll say, hey, does looking at this help? Because that's what I do when I'm doing stuff by myself without it. That's what I did before. I Googled things and I would find other implementations of it in core or other contrib modules and try to use that to help my thing work. So I do the same sort of thing with GPT.
I'm sorry, and you maybe have answered this already. Are you cutting and pasting just into the website for ChatGPT, or do you have an integration where you can with your
I'm
PHP
using the app, the standalone app, or in a web browser. I don't have
Okay,
I don't have my IDE connected
sure. That's
them at
my
all.
question. So you're cutting and pasting back and forth.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Any questions for Justin? Can I maybe show something quick about what I just recently did and maybe get some feedback, or you can say some things, Justin?
Sure.
This is just so about a week and a half ago, I watch, as I said before, I watch too much TV, and for a long time I wanted to sort of build a website where I could sort of list the TV shows I'm watching and maybe make some lists, things like that. But the big obstacle has always been that I don't want to have to create a node for each new TV show manually, especially when I know there are APIs out there where you can pull that data down. So, and I've been thinking about this for years, and I've never got around to it. 2 weeks ago, a Friday night, I needed a task to keep my brain busy, and I just went to ChatGPT, and I can actually show you the thread. I just started out with write a backdrop module to access a database of all TV shows. And in it, like literally gave me multiple files. But in the first version, it assumed that I was creating my own database. So it actually sort of created a table and stuff and said enable it. So I got down and then I said, well, is there an API where I can access an existing database of TV shows? And ChatGPT gave me like 5 different sites that have APIs. I went around, I looked a little bit at them. I just decided maybe this one would be the one I used. So my next query was, can you write a simple module for backdrop to fetch data from the tracked API? And that, so I'm just sort of, each query is building. Up until this point, I haven't actually cut and pasted any code because I can tell that it's not quite what I want. And now at this version, I think I might have started to actually cut and paste the code because it actually gave me something that, is now, I had to get a tracked ID, an API key, and it was actually fetching. At the end of this module, well, and then, what happens is I implement the code and I get this error. So I just say, I'm getting this error. And right away, ChatGPT says, okay, we think this is why. Here's your updated code. And it tells me exactly which file needs to be changed. It explains why it's making the change and how to test it. And then I say, well, okay, what it was doing at this stage, the module was just going out and getting a list of the 10 most currently trending shows on Track TV. Well, I wanted to be able to create a node out of any of those shows. So then I said I would, bad grammar, but amazingly, it seems to do pretty good with bad grammar or spelling. I would, for my module, to create a node for each of these shows. Okay, so now it gives me another, the next updated version. It says, steps to complete, enhancements. And then once again, I got an error. I type that in. Oh, well, this is why you got that error. Here's a fix for that. Anyways, I don't know. I thought this would be useful to show how I just went back and forth. Then I typed in another error. Go ahead.
My experience with doing this and doing things like that is that it will not fix it completely when sometimes.
Right.
And then you're like, well, that didn't work. So try something else. And then you're like, well, that didn't work either. And then you try something else. And then you say, that didn't work. And then it goes back to the original thing that didn't work the first time.
That can happen. In this particular module, I had a lot of luck. I mean, other things, though, that you'll run into is it might give you some code, and there might be a Drupal solution in the solution that's not backdrop. And I will say, oh, that looks like a Drupal solution, not backdrop. And it'll come back and say, oh, you're right. Here's the backdrop.
So can you,
version.
if you
Yep.
if you give it specific examples, like you tell it this should be a node, the class should be node instead of standard class, will it like remember that and use node instead of standard class for creating nodes in the future?
Perhaps it'll get better at it, but it won't completely. Like Tim had a good idea here. Like let me show off one of my conversations here.
Because I saw that immediately, like you were scrolling by and I said, oh, that's gonna break. Like immediately.
Yeah, and to be clear, it's not like I'm not doing any work in between here. At some point I had to like realize, well, I need a content type. I need to define the fields I want to use. And so I kind of defined my content type, and then I think I shared that with it. The other thing I want to point out, I'll turn it over to you in a second, Justin, is that I did realize eventually that I could do things. This is something I've struggled with a long time, is I could you can attach files. So at some point, like I got the module far enough where now I had 3 or 4 different files, and I had been modifying those for a while. And at some point I could like upload all 3 of them together. I mean, it did a pretty good job of remembering the multiple files. And if I would make changes, it would say, oh, well, you have to change this file this way, and this other file in this way. But at some point, if you've got far enough away from the original, you might need to upload the 3 files where they're currently at and say, here, based on where I'm at with these modules now, what do I do? And it will go through and give you suggestions for each, like each of the files. Go ahead.
Another frightening thing with that is that you can put screenshots in it.
Really?
You can put pictures in it. You can put pictures in it of your website and say, I want to move this button over there and I want certain things, different colors and whatnot, and it will make the CSS for you.
Well, this is why I wanted to have this conversation. That never occurred to me. It's very good, though, at interpreting errors. But again, like as everybody's going to tell you, it's not perfect. You can't rely on it. You need to look at what it's doing, and you need to give it feedback. And then, like I did use this on some core code, and it's going to do things like using the short form array syntax, which we don't use in core. And I could just tell it, rewrite this without the short form code it, whatever. But in that case, I just manually fixed that based on feedback from the core committer. I'm trying to think if there's any other examples of sort of things I learned, but definitely, just you're really able to iterate. Now, as the module gets more and more complex, this could get more. Oh, well, I did, as the module got more and more complex, I found that instead of trying to work with the entire module, I would just pull out individual functions and say, okay, I want this function to also do X or something. Or I might copy 2 functions into it and say, this function is supposed to call that function and do X. And,
Yeah.
you know, it could handle that.
Now, another thing like that is sometimes it doesn't give you complete code in its response. Like you
Mhm.
have to tell it, hey, give me the whole, give me all of it. Don't just give me the little snippets, and then you have to figure out where it goes. Or and
I've had it do both, where it gives me the entire code and then it'll say, here are the parts you have to change.
right,
Right. Where so you don't have to copy and paste everything that it's given you, because most of it might be feeding you back mostly stuff that you already have, but it might point out exactly where it made changes. And this is what I've been surprised with, is how it explains what it's done, which is very useful. Sometimes I read that in detail, sometimes I kind of brush over that and just assume it's right. Or, you know, I can tell what it's doing, so I don't need to read this. So
now these conversations, sometimes it gets stuck on a specific answer, and
yeah,
and I don't get anywhere. Like I start a new chat with it.
sure.
Because I want to get rid of all of the old stuff that we were talking about.
Hmm.
But as long as it's in my memory, it it remembers it. Like I was working on the alt text module, and I said, "Hey, remember that remember that module we were working on with the OpenAI alt module?" And it's like, "Yeah, I remember that. We were working on converting that and making it all work and stuff." So I said, because I ran into a problem, I had a first solution for that, and then I tried it out on a dev branch of a real site, and I also had the manual crop module installed, and it broke both of them. It couldn't upload images anywhere. So this was my conversation starter yesterday. I'm like, I'm testing out a site, it conflicts with manual crop, and then I reminded it of the code that we made, and then we went off on a very, very long conversation about this specific problem with it,
Hmm.
which was kind of not related to the other one.
Hmm.
It was just and it we I ended up with a completely different code for the module. And this went on for a very, very long time. But it's a lot of what Tim talked about of, hey, the I got this error, do it another way. Um, type sort of thing. But I have multiple conversations about this module in here.
And there
Okay,
were,
I have a, oh,
go
yeah,
ahead.
I have another question about,
Mhm.
can you teach it like which version of PHP that you need to support?
Oh,
Because
probably. Yeah, you could put in the prompts like
I
when
need
you're
to
starting
support
out.
from this to this.
Yep.
If
Because
you
I know that,
mentioned that at the beginning of the discussion, it should do a pretty good job of remembering that, but it wouldn't
okay,
hurt maybe to occasionally remind it.
okay. Because I noticed that in your examples that you guys were looking at, it uses the null coalescing operator an awful lot,
Mhm.
which doesn't work in PHP 5.6.
I haven't tried.
Oh,
I have.
that's the other thing we should mention with the OpenAI module.
Mhm.
It won't work with like less than PHP 8.2
Okay.
because the OpenAI SDK, the PHP that it the library that it relies on requires that. And that's another that
Is
and
that
thinking about
documented somewhere?
it says that on the module page, I believe. Um, but that's another thing with this module, with the way I structured it and the way it's released, it has a composer file in it.
Mhm.
But the the folks who use the module, that it shouldn't really matter to them that there's a composer file in it. It just makes it easier for me.
So I've actually started doing that in some of my modules as well. And then if you use the Composer Manager module, it will stop it from having conflicts.
I
Yeah.
haven't gotten around to use Composer Manager yet, but it has a composer file in it, so I can pull the latest PHP client and
Yeah, yeah.
it
But if you're,
it
sorry,
it goes in a vendor directory instead of a library directory. So
right. Yeah, but so if you're using this style of pulling in dependencies in
yep,
multiple modules, you could end up in a situation where you have conflicting dependencies. So Composer Manager will grab the composer.json from all your modules and compile them into one so that you have it's like an extra manual step, but it stops you from having dependencies problems, which is
I
nice.
think we need to kind of wrap up the recorded version of this. I do think the second part, though, sort of how to use little tips. I think we should have more discussions like this, Justin, to sort of help. You know, what Irina said is maybe we should do a how to use OpenAI to port a module, sort of a
but
session.
when I figured out the screenshot thing, that was
Big
that
deal.
was shattering. Like
Okay, yeah,
Can you connect it to PHP Storm and have it just look at a project that you're working on?
probably.
mhm.
Yeah, I haven't done that, taken it that far, and that.
JetBrains has their own AI thing too that you can subscribe to that integrates more easily with it.
I think
And
is that
GitHub Ho-
included? Is that included with the developer edition? The
I
The
wa
other thing I haven't looked at is GitHub apparently has built-in tools to do some of
Mhm.
this, and I don't know how they work.
there's a
I
free
meant to
edition of GitHub Copilot now that I got emails about yesterday. So
exactly, and like I should play with that and see how that works within within the web UI.
I've
What
watched
you
I've
can do.
watched how people do that though with the
Mhm.
integrated AI tools in the IDE,
Yeah,
and I'm just not sure about it because I've got my I've got my workflow the way I do it now,
right.
and it works for me, keeping them separate. So I don't really want to mess with it.
But I would like if somebody else figures out how to do that and has a good workflow, it would be nice for them to show it to us. It doesn't mean I would switch over necessarily. I'm still just using Sublime text for my text editing. So, and that might have an AI plugin. I don't know, but I'm happy sort of doing what I'm doing for now until I can see that it's a lot easier another way. But anyways, we should have more of these discussions. Is there any other final tips that you would make, Justin? I mean, I'll stress, I know a lot of people still have concerns about AI and its accuracy. I think it's really important to review what it's doing. You get better with the prompting and really, think about it as like another, you don't go into it thinking like it's giving you final output, right? It's sort of working with you to generate it. And, I guess another big step that we haven't talked about is that there were places where I would go off and say, it might be easier for me to just write a little snippet of code. But then if I wasn't confident in the code I'd written, I would just put it back into OpenAI and say, can you improve this code? And it might be something like, here's a good example of where that I think is important is if you end up with something like the 3 layers of nested if statements, because like me, you're not really efficient at using the ors and ands. I could post that into OpenAI and say, make this more efficient, and it would, tighten up the code and just make it neater. I think another example is if you're trying to use other code to make your new thing, and there's something in the other code you don't understand, you can paste that in there and say, what is this doing? And it will explain it to you. So then you can, how to translate it. That's another thing you run into. Can you think of any other tips like that, Justin? Any other little tasks? Uh, yeah, okay. Well, why don't we leave it at that? And the recorded version of this meeting, if you want to stick around for a minute, we can.
I think I figured out why the
The dev site wasn't working.
yep,
Okay.
it was the PHP version.
Ah, interesting. Okay, but let's save that for later. But so you may not be able to run this module right now on dev sites, is what Justin is telling us. You might have to run it locally, or and it could be check out the latest information in the README. There should be probably something in the README, Justin, about PHP requirements. Okay, let's end the recording. Thanks, everybody. We are.